Hello, everyone, and welcome to this weekly webinar produced by Business Performance USA. We are honored to have you here as our guest today, and we really appreciate you taking the time. We're going to make sure we make this hour worth your while. Today's webinar is Mighty Results. What will what got you here get you there? In other words, is it time to think on a clean sheet of paper about your management style and strategy and see if you can get to the next level of performance? I am Victor Dominguez, Managing Partner of the Ligature Group. I will be your host for this hour. Your executive presenter today is Miss Cynthia Stewart, Managing Partner for Evermore Services, your partner in building tomorrow businesses today. Cynthia is also my partner as well in a number of ventures, and it's an absolute joy and privilege to work with her because it gives me an opportunity to learn from her on a daily basis. So today is your day to learn from her as well. A little more on Cynthia so you can understand where she's coming from. Cynthia holds her MBA and is certified by the American Society for Quality as a quality manager and organizational excellence, as well as a Six Sigma black belt, so she knows her stuff. She partners with leaders in growing high-performance organizations through a strategic and staged approach to employee development, quality improvement, and business problem solving. Cynthia successfully led and directed culture teams at all levels across 11 states during her tenure as Senior Internal Business Improvement Advisor with Central and Southwest and American Electric Power. That included strategic merger assignments, which is never easy, and those assignments created the third largest value-generating utility in the United States, so big time. She is credited with having guided thousands of people in hundreds of teams and accruing $150 million in direct savings and close to $2 billion in indirect savings. She has mastered the art of team building and mining value in any situation. So clearly, Cynthia is exemplary and a model of what we do here at Business Performance USA with our volunteer executives. We bring high caliber people to you to share expertise, and that's what this hour is all about. So let's make sure you get your hour's worth of time and that you come up with some useful knowledge and action items to help transform and change your business. So we do encourage you to send questions using the chat feature. You can see that in the user interface. And you can post questions directly, chat or questions, whatever is most intuitive for you. We're happy to oblige. But if you do have a specific question about Cynthia, use the question feature and we can record it and respond and share that exchange with others. If you have a question afterwards, email me, Victor, at businessperformanceusa.org, and I'll get right back to you. If I can't answer your question, I'll make sure I can find somebody who can. We record these webinars, and we want you to be aware of that. And you can watch these webinars on demand at your leisure at youtube.com/user/bpusa.org. So, Cynthia, I guess it's time to get started. Let's let you take it away.
Well, great. Thank you, Victor. I love to do these webinars with you, and I'm really looking forward to today's webinar. What I've done is I've taken lots of experience and practices and processes, and I've put them into this webinar to talk about management processes, or what I also call the performance management system. And the practices that I'm going to share with you, what shaped my thinking really had to do with when I came across The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack, and also later Designed to Adapt, Leading Healthcare in Challenging Times by Dr. John Carnegie. So I'm going to share what I've learned and also what I've applied in business across these years. And I can tell you that these are well-validated processes, and I'll share some of my experience with them. So today you're going to learn about core management processes. And these are the ways that a lot of times people don't even think about these things. But no matter whether you're a solopreneur, working with partners that are independent of you, suppliers, customers, and so forth, or you're a large corporation, these management practices can scale and size to your particular situation. And when you put them all together, they really are very, very effective. And they're effective if you have 2 employees or you have 2 million employees, 2,000 employees. It doesn't matter. These really are ways to engage people that you work with every day. So, this is how you're going to design your company's future.
Cynthia, I'm going to jump in real quick and make a note of that because I know you well, and when you talk about management practices and structures, I want to clarify because people typically think of the stratified hierarchical structure of a company, and that's really not what you're talking about here, is my understanding. And the problem we run into, of course, is that organizations, as they try and get flatter and flatter, they tend to leave their strata or their hierarchy in place. So those layers prevail and they prevent the type of engagement that I think you're talking to. Am I correct in that
Yeah,
summary?
that's a way to think about it from a traditional perspective. And yet, as companies grow very, very large, there is a need to stratify. But the practices that I'm talking about is how you really view employees. And we're going to get into some mindsets that will help understand that, yes, while you stratify, that you have to have leaders and that kind of thing at the top level, and you have to have organizations that will work well in serving your customer. And so you have particular functions and so forth. Still, the practices that I'm talking about help to flatten the organization, even if you have to stratify around um, the structure and how employees are put together in teams and things like that.
Thanks, Cynthia. I appreciate that.
And that may sound a little paradoxical, but I think once we get to the end of this, maybe it'll get clear. I'll be very clear about what it takes. And no matter how many levels of hierarchy or strata or management that you have, you'll understand where we're coming from with this. So hang tight because we're going to get to all of that. And it's going to, I think, be pretty well revealed. The reason that you benefit from this approach that I'm going to give you is that you are going to double the probability of achieving your company purpose, goals, and objectives, and that's what you want. And you're going to ensure that you have an organization that's really aligned. And we're going to show you a formation of geese. That's what I'm talking about. You're going to get to see this. And we're going to show you how to make that plan, that strategy, that purpose really come alive. Now, first, I'd like to just stop and think a minute by like, why do we do this? I mean, what individually do we really want for all of our efforts? And in my mind, what we want is to improve the quality of our lives through spending time with those that we love and spending time on the things that we love. And honestly, the better organized we are in our workplace, the better it runs, and the more it frees us up to enjoy our families and our hobbies and our vacations and our time away from work. So, when you think about why we do this, I mean, that's why we do this. And that's why what I have to say in this webinar really matters. Now we go from individuals to businesses, and what do we want? Well, we all know that across time we want the value to grow. We want everything to move up and to the right. That's good. And anything that doesn't work and that's bad, if you will, the pain, we want it to move down and to the right across time. Now, I've put engagement on the top because really that's where everything gets started. Universally, we really want to engage our customers and our employees, and we want them to think that our company is fantastic, that our products and our services are really fantastic. We want our profits to grow year over year, no question. And we want our headaches to diminish. We don't want to go home with stress. We want to go home, feel good, spend our evenings with our families and our loved ones and on our hobbies. And so that's what we really want for our businesses. With that in mind, then what we need is an engagement culture. And what I've done here, excuse me, and what Victor has helped to do visually is to show that there's when a well designed, well orchestrated performance management system has basically five synergistic subsystems. And these are what I mean by management processes. You could call them leadership practices or leadership processes as well. So I prefer leadership, but I'm going to talk about them as management because it's really a management system and it's how we're managing towards achieving corporate goals. In this slide, you can see that what I like to say is people that row together win together. You know, if you're in a rowboat like this, if you've ever rowed or watched rowing of any kind, you realize that these five persons here are very syncopated in how they row, and they really have to be a great team to win. And the leader has to set the pace, and the follower has to make sure that he's steering the boat in a way that's really, or the one at the bottom of the boat has to steer the boat in a way that they're heading where they go. So everybody's involved. And how we get there in these five systems is shared purpose and goals. That's one subsystem. Scores and rewards, and these are my names. Credible communication, adaptive problem solving, and learning and growth. Now, in a minute, we're going to do a poll, but I want to set up and use this wonderful construct that I learned from Dr. Carnegie called M2S2. M2S2 mindset, method, strategy, and structure. And basically, by looking at these systems through mindset, strategy, structure, and method, you're going to it'll help you understand a little bit better the perceptions that we're talking about as well as the ways to get there. So when we talk about mindset, what we mean is those things that you hold in mind in terms of your perceptions, your beliefs, and your attitudes. And mindset's where we really have to start, especially with a leader's mindset. What's the mindset for your organization? In strategy, it's really your guiding principles and decisions. It's kind of that long term view of how we want things to work and how we're going to focus. In structure, that's your work and organization structures. And we're going to talk about these in terms of examples. Your method is the approach you use to get things done. So there's lots of methods. Those are things like GAP, Six Sigma, of course, I know that, or lean manufacturing. Also, what I'm presenting are concepts out of adaptive design. And so we're going to be using that as the method for problem solving and performance improvement. So these work together mindset, strategy, structure, and method. That's an introduction to how we're going to talk about these different systems. But Victor, first, I want to do a poll and just poll our audience to find out um, what the practices are in terms of having a strategic plan or a business plan at their company.
Absolutely, Cynthia. Um, we always appreciate feedback. It helps us guide our education and information delivery to you. So, having a strategic plan is one thing, but is it communicated? And when you show up to work, are your actions aligned with that plan? And when you see variances in your actions, does it set off a flag uh, that perhaps your actions or collective actions are not fully aligned with strategic plan? I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but I'm just giving you other context and the ways to think of this. And we're seeing numbers come in, and clearly, yes is rising very, very quickly. We're going to give it just a few more seconds here, just one, two, or three, and I'm going to come close to closing this out and share the results with you. It looks like I will close it out, and clearly, yes is predominant. 68% of our audience uh, feels they do have a strategic plan and a business plan at their company, reasonably high percentage. No, however, is 15%, and I don't know is 17%. Both no and I don't know, very close. Regrettably, I don't even know is can be a problem. So, what do you make of that, Cynthia?
Actually, I thought that I don't know would be higher. So That's very good that people know that there is a strategic plan and a business plan for their company. And we'll find out a little bit more about that in a minute with some of our other polls. Okay, the reason I ask that is the shared purpose and goals is really about your planning system. And as the mindset says, when we plan together, we win together. And in most companies that I have experienced and heard about and been witness to and studied, and that's quite a few, it seems that the planning function itself is really relegated to a certain level in the organization or a certain department in the organization. There's a planning department. And to some extent, that makes sense because what you really have at those levels are experts, or they should be experts. But the truth is that planning together needs to be a well designed, uh, fully engaging planning system. So when we plan together, we win together. It's the mindset of we're in this together, and we need to, in order to share purpose and goals, we need to engage people's minds in doing that. So on the strategy, I recommend a distributed planning system in order to bring the plan to life and give it legs. And that's so we're saying we want to plan together, win together. That's the mindset. The strategy is we have this is our planning system and we want to bring the plan to life. And the structure is shared ownership and clear roles at every level. So we talked about hierarchy a moment ago, Victor, and let me kind of address that. We know that the top officers should be embodying their view for the business over a 3 to 5 year period. And that's really the strategic plan. And it's appropriate and they're at the right level to do that. And then we know that the functional or regional or process leaders will take a 1 to 2 year view to develop the business plan from that strategic plan. And then they should be working with their teams to line up the initiatives and the actions to move the business forward. So this says that everybody shares a role down to the first line or the front, I shouldn't say down, but across and out to the frontline level, where they are involved in more tactical actions, but they are certainly involved. And in a moment, I'll give you an example of where this really worked well. Uh,
So Cynthia, if I'm cutting you off, let me know.
yeah, I
Uh,
didn't get to method yet, but go ahead.
um, no, please go then. I'll loop back. Go ahead.
Okay. And then the method is just this well defined inclusive planning process. And it's done to involve business planning, resource planning, and action planning on an annual cycle. Victor, go ahead.
Thank you, Cynthia. Going back to that slide in reference to structure and shared ownership, to me that speaks to the poll question of, does your company have a strategy and is it articulated? I don't know how one can have a sense of shared ownership if they're not on point with the strategy and understanding it. But what seems to be a challenge for me also, in my experience, is that shared ownership also requires shared accountability. And that sometimes is a difficult stage of, of methodology or, you know, collaboration to get to. Do you agree with the accountability factor having to be present in order to
Yes,
have shared ownership?
I'm going to be talking about accountability. It's not necessarily in the words on the slide, but the credible communication system will really is where accountability happens. And I'm going to talk about that. But absolutely, shared ownership at every level, and roles at every level. Everybody must own their job to be engaged. They must own the outcomes that they achieve to be engaged. So, this synergistic set of systems is just the right mix, the right views of things that get people engaged. And accountability is certainly a part of the puzzle.
Thanks, Cynthia.
So I'm talking now just kind of at the top level planning practices, and if This may be the way that your company operates, but basically on an annual basis, there is a look at the planning process. So first, you're making sure that you've established and or you're confirming the business purpose. All businesses really need a purpose. I spoke to this in Vital Signs webinar at the very beginning. I spoke again to it in the line of significance on this critical numbers series. Purpose is critical, and that meaningful purpose is how we're really going to engage people, because rewards, even though I talk about rewards, uh, rewards and punishment are really not long-term motivators. Purpose is long-term motivator. So when we have the purpose, we articulate that through our vision, mission, and our values. And if you want more on this, you really need to go back to the Vital Signs webinar and the white paper, and it kind of talks more about the how-to of this. And from there is where you say, okay, let's take a 3 to 5 year look at how we're going to actualize, make real, if you will, our purpose and our vision and our missions. And that's essentially where at least your top leaders are, your marketing and your financial, in your operations, and over your different regions, over your, or like as even as a solopreneur, you really want to think, where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years? So you can work on that year over year to get there. And then you develop that business plan, which is really about initiatives and actions. And those are how you actually begin to actualize your strategic plan. And you engage employees in developing their action plans and their critical numbers at the front line. And through the other systems is how you're going to hear more about the way that this happens. So those are basically your essential planning practices. And as the visual here that Victor did shows, we take our vision and purpose, we go to realize it, and we work on ways to motivate. So these are the things that we'll be talking about.
Thanks, Cynthia. And I would encourage our audience, again, to use the question feature if they have any questions. In addition, this is when it comes down to strategic planning and understanding that process, this is why business performance exists and why we have our executive sponsors and volunteers with Business Performance USA. We have them across the country, and always feel free to reach out to us and ask for advice, ask for some help or guidance, or simply brainstorming. And we've got the resources here for you if you're curious about getting your 3 to 5 strategic plan moving forward. Thanks, Cynthia.
Okay, very good. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you look at this visual, and it's very good, it says that we have stakeholders, employees, customers, shareholders, and suppliers, and that they're aware of our business purpose. And our purpose, of course, is to serve them, um, and to engage them, and to make them money, and to use their supplies, their resources, their materials, and that kind of thing. And we want that alignment of purpose. And we get that as we, again, lay out our vision, mission, and values to really fulfill the purpose of our company. When we begin to establish our strategies, we look across our strategic focus areas, and I tee them up as purpose, employee, customer, operational, and financial. So basically, continuity of purpose, employee learning is how I call that, customer engagement, operational excellence, and financial expertise. And each of those areas, so let's say purpose is ideal patient care as an example. And we know that readmission rates are now being fined by the government. So that means that, for instance, I live in Oklahoma, that most of the hospitals in Oklahoma have been fined just as they've implemented this for to the high level of readmission rates. And so Oklahoma hospitals now are going to have to give up anywhere up to 2% of their Medicare payments in order to pay for this fine. So that's where 2% of the Medicare, by the way, this can add up to billions and billions going into government. Um, Maybe that's to fund the health information exchange, but nevertheless, there is a goal on part of hospitals for readmission rates to get lowered. So let's say that's our goal. So what are we going to do? What are our objectives? Well, we're going to have to target the populations where we have readmission rates that are high. We're going to have to educate them, and we're going to have to work with our home care providers and caregivers to make sure that they're working with us to keep people from having to be readmitted to the hospital. And so from there, we have those objectives, and then we have to talk about very specific actions. So that's basically the planning process. And what we're looking to achieve is our alignment goals. And this is a formation of geese, and it's very interesting to me as you look at the picture that of the think of the picture we saw earlier of the rowboat. Same thing happens in the water, right? So that alignment is very, very interesting. There's a leader who's basically um, up against the resistance uh, that they have to deal with in the wind currents or the water currents or the business currents or the tidal waves, and we have the aligned work of the teammates who are basically the geese that are in the wake of this leader. And as you know, for geese, they actually take on different roles. Sometimes they're the leader, and sometimes they're the follower. They get to rotate to the very back of the line where they can kind of relax a little bit more. So this formation is very important for getting alignment in an organization as well. And one way we talked about in line of significance to do that is to connect the work groups and individuals to the overall goals. So there's this cascading effect, if you will, across the processes, core processes, and also into the very activities of the employees. And as we look at our measures, we are looking at our organizational process and activities. And the reason I teed this up is because we're about to talk about scores and rewards. So I talked about this in line of significance and again, vital signs as well, a little bit more about how you set your organizational critical numbers. So let's do another poll, Victor. That was sort of an intro and a recap of some of the other things that I've talked about in other webinars. I'd like to go to scores and rewards next, but I'd like to find out from our audience how clear they are about the actions, how their actions contribute to the company's performance.
Thank you, Cynthia. We've got a basic true or false question here. These can be answered using the interface, the GoToWebinar interface. Obviously, click 1 for true, 2 for false. And when you show up to your work, do you really see the linear connection between your actions and how the company delivers performance? As of course in regards to the strategic plan and how you may be contributing to that, production numbers, quality numbers, hospital readmission numbers. Um, it takes a lot of people to affect one score, so one cannot really underestimate their role and how they contribute to the overall company. We've got numbers coming in, and I'm going to give it just 10 more seconds here. It's pretty basic. And it's bouncing around. It's pretty close. It's kind of a close tie. I'm going to close this out now, Cynthia, and reveal the answers. We've got true at 54% and false at 46%, so reasonably close. Less, what do you think of that?
Well, I think that's pretty typical, and I think that's pretty sad. What that says is that they're lacking some of these systems that I'm talking about today to make sure that everyone understands how they're contributing to the bottom line and to the customer satisfaction and so forth. So thanks, Victor. I'm going to move on because we're going to show you how to get people's actions aligned to contribute to the company's performance. So we talked about shared purpose and goals. And now I want to talk about what I call scores and rewards. And first, just to think about scores and rewards, what is that encompassing? We're really here talking about how do we score performance? And we all know that any competitive game, any business, um, customers online, everybody gets scored. It's just the way we work, right? And we kind of know where want to know where we are towards our goals, and so we score that. Where are we towards our goals? And the other thing I want to talk about is now we're going to do all this scoring, and when we achieve our company goals, it's time to reward people. I call it sharing the Thanksgiving feast. And just just if you guys have watched Downton Abbey, I think this is perfect. Perfect way to think about this. So it's Thanksgiving and people have worked very, very hard. And people are showing up with their dishes that they made at home and they brought it over to your house. And then we set the table and we tell everybody that's been cooking, goodbye, thank you very much. And then those that have been sitting around watching football come to the table. And if we it makes no sense, right? Of course you don't run it that way and you don't want to run your business that way either. We don't want all the efforts that employees bring to the table and make the company run to not be able to share in the feast at the end. Now, sometimes it's famine, sometimes it isn't feast. Maybe it's times of famine or plenty. We want employees to be able to share in that. So, what's the strategy? Well, the strategy is to align actions to the purpose and goal. We've talked about that. The structure is the line of significance with regard to scores and rewards. What are the significant actions that employees can take to really move the company forward? And they need to be aligned at every level. So that's the structure. So what's the method? Well, the method is your employee incentive plan to share the feast or famine, and it's also the scorecards or reports that you put up. So let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. Basically, scores and rewards are your incentive practices, and they're set up to get people in alignment. That's basically it, and to align to achieve the company's goals. So, first, we've got to establish a baseline and set our targets. Once we've decided what needs to get measured, and again, I've talked about that in detail in another webinar, then we have to set our targets, and then we have to set up a way to track critical numbers. We have to create our reports and scorecards. Now, a lot of people are thinking what I'm talking about is IT systems. And if you have IT systems, most companies do, those are great sources of data, hopefully good, valid data with good integrity. But sometimes all you need to do is do a do a check sheet, do an audit of a particular item. Let's say that for some reason, we've found that there's a particular material or supply that's missing. So what we do is a check in, check out sheet. Obviously, employees can, get around that if they want to, but if they're engaged, they won't. They'll participate. If you make it a game, they'll participate. So there are ways to engage people to do audits, do it now for a while, for a week. I've done that many times where I just have employees check things out for about a week and log things for us. And then we take a look and then we go and then we decide how to improve things. Then we go back and audit. So it doesn't have to be an everyday deal, it just has to be something that is meaningful to the group to show what their performance is on specific actions or specific problems. So then we align our incentives and our rewards with the vital signs, critical numbers, and targets. And we make sure that everybody knows what those incentives are, and we establish the performance criteria within our performance management, which also is our performance review system. So these are ways to get things aligned.
Cynthia, I've got a question here, if I can jump in with it.
Go
Uh,
ahead.
One of our members is asking a question about performance criteria and hitting goals, and quotas is a term that they used. And then they refer to the generally the incentive there is punishment rather than reward. um, sort of you better make your numbers kind of approach. So,
Yeah.
how do you that really just goes back to the mindsets, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly. That's exactly my answer.
oh, okay. So,
It's mindset. So we've said we want to share the Thanksgiving feast. If you got people recognizing that they share in the company's uh, outcome, right? The results that they get. And sharing the feast, that's eating or feeding. That could be time off. There's lots of ways to share the feast that are not necessarily financial. But if the company does really well, then everyone at every level should share in that. What I don't like to see at all is where leaders get huge bonuses when their companies are doing poorly. So that's a mindset issue that leaders should get more than the workers. That's not sharing the feast. So that's why I say mindset, the mindset of share the feast, share the famine or the feast is really the right kind of mindset that you need to drive.
but I think she uses the word an atmosphere of fear. So, there's a lot of things in companies, and it gets back to culture and mindset is the start, but it's difficult when management doesn't have the mindset. So, unfortunately, in this case, it seems like fear is a motivator, and there's not much feasting going on. But
Right. And that's why I like these practices. I think there is way too much desperation and fear,
mhm,
and that people believe that fear is a motivator. It's a demotivator.
right.
And
So what I
I've experienced, I have experienced where leaders used, you're going to lose your job. That should be enough motivation for you. They literally would say that. They would call people on the carpet. These practices don't work, especially in this day and age. So if a company it's just poor leadership is the bottom line. And a person that's involved in that kind of thing can work with their supervisor to help them, or their leader, if you will, to help them see. It takes some time, but to help them see that's not motivating. That doesn't motivate me. Here's what motivates me is the best way to start.
Right. I think we have to move along, but my advice for that individual would be it's maybe the supervisor. I'm projecting, so I'm not inferring anything with this individual asked the question, but maybe a supervisor is the problem. What I suggest in these situations is find one colleague with a mindset of ethical behavior, of collaboration, of trust, of sharing, and build a relationship with them and start in a very small group with practicing the type of principles and exhibiting the cultural behaviors that you want to see within the company, and let that be a grass fire to start cultural change within a small group and expand to others as you collaborate across your connections within the company.
Yeah, Victor, that's a good advice. What I also find is you can't believe that all managers, all supervisors, and all leaders are of the same mindset. So you can also reach anywhere in the organization and develop a relationship with a leader who has a mindset of growing the employees and operating with engagement, really good engagement practices. So there's the key,
Exactly.
though, is to reach out.
Right. Good people need to come together and unify and set a pattern of positive culture behavior. But thanks, Cynthia. Let's move on.
Set a pattern and set a model for that. Okay, so here's another poll. We talk about our team's performance and our contribution to the company's performance. And how often does that happen in your company? Victor, let's take a quick poll. We want to watch our time now.
Okay. Again, the topic is, you know, sort of reviews. How did we do? Um, Sometimes this is not just, it's not always just positive, gee, we did great numbers, but it's having a critical eye and the ability to discuss good news and bad news. build on the wins, and correct the losses, if you will. And it takes a difficult, it takes, again, a culturally viable atmosphere to do that. Numbers are coming in. Um, Monthly seems really common. Certainly, that's very common in a sales organization. And we're going to close this out pretty soon here. Um, Quarterly is picking up as well. So I'm going to close this poll out, give you just a few more seconds to wrap up this poll. Do you discuss performance rarely, annually, quarterly, monthly, or weekly? And we're going to close the poll and I'll share the results with you. And there you go. Okay, annually comes in at 18%. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Rarely comes in at 18%. That's unfortunate. Number two, annually, 22%. It's building. Quarterly is 32%. Now a slight drop. Monthly is at 28%. I thought that would be higher. And weekly is 0%, which is kind of interesting. The top winner here is quarterly at 38%. Then next closely is monthly at 28%. There you go, Cynthia.
Okay. Well, the practice that I'm going to talk about um, is basically the more frequent, the better. And it's our credible communication system. Now, credible is that we share stories about the business. We share customer stories. That's your mindset. We share stories. We talk about the business. And we talk about it online in our, our company blogs or our company it depends on how big you are, but there's blogs, there's internal communication systems, there's internal reports and so forth. But there's meetings and there's on the job quick conferences. So we share stories. Those stories, and what I mean by that is just we share things in a way that's engaging. We share things that are pertinent to the task at hand. We share things that will help uh, grow people in their knowledge. And we speak the truth. What I see is a lot of withholding, especially in leadership, top leadership. A lot of withholding. We don't tell things. I've been in environments where everything got shared in terms of the financials and so forth and so on, and we knew what we could share inside the company and outside the company. So, sharing stories is the mindset that you want. We talk with each other, we communicate, we tell each other about things, we tell each other about customers, we tell each other about our experiences, good experiences and bad experiences. I once worked for a company that safety was really critical, and that was the electric companies. And as you know, people work around live wires and get electrocuted and lose limbs and fingers and toes and so forth and so on. And so they talked frequently about the stories of how to stay safe, and stories about how people were injured when they didn't follow the practices. So those are the stories I'm talking about, things that are pertinent. Um, we speak the truth means that we don't sugarcoat when we don't need to sugarcoat, and we tell exactly what's going on, and we don't try to um, keep people from knowing what's going on. And we regularly, the strategy is we got to discuss the financials and the results on a pretty regular basis. The reason that monthly is so common is that we base everything on the accounting system. If you're using other types of games and scores and rewards, you know every week where you stand or should know so that you can move on a dime. So the structure is that, again, we're still in this shared ownership and clear roles at every level. So that's the organizational structure. And then, of course, we have IT structures in terms of reporting systems and things like that, where people are getting the information that they need to be able to discuss where they are. Things like safety, some things you just track every day. So it's pretty easy to know where you are. And those stories go out very quickly. Stories online about customers and their engagement in Facebook and so forth. Those are ways that stories are being shared today, as well as LinkedIn. So there's lots of ways to share the stories. And the method is really to huddle every week. And you know what a huddle is? It's really designed off of the football. Every When football players go into the football game, they have a plan. They've studied their competitor, the people they're playing against, and they go in with a plan. And then they huddle when they've got to change that plan because now they've got the scoreboard up there. They know what the score is. They know how they're doing on their plan. And they know that they've got to shift and adjust so that they can really carry on with the football game and win it. So, huddling needs to be a frequent activity in a team by team basis. And there, I actually don't have time today, but there is a whole huddle system that can be worked out for companies, and I've done this. I've worked with companies in this. I've worked in companies that do this, and it really helps the engagement because what you're doing is this is how you're bringing your plan alive. So basically, your credible communication practices essentially involve huddle huddles that are conducted weekly in teams to discuss their tactical plans, is what I'm talking about, and evaluate progress and forecast. Okay, that doesn't say it, but that is exactly what happens in huddles that are run well is that you come to the table with what you did. Let's say it's a sales team, Victor, because you talk about sales. The sales team, they stood there and they said, okay, next week I'm going to get X new customers. I'm going to sell X products, and so forth and so on. Even in a safety team or an operational team, they can say, okay, for safety this week, we're going to put our eye on the ball because this is the time change week. And if we don't watch ourselves when we're driving, we're going to have issues. And so they get to the end of the week and they say, well, did we make it? Now that's holding people accountable. They set a goal for the week, they come back, they talk about the goal, and they account for what happened. They tell their stories and they account for, that's what it means, account for what happened. And then they forecast again. So next week I'm going to do this. This, by doing this communication system in this way, you hold people, your people are holding themselves accountable essentially because you're giving them an opportunity to say what it is they're going to achieve this week and and then if they don't achieve it, what was the story behind why they didn't? What did they learn and how are they going to improve that? So that's what's happening in when I say guide employees in reporting performance and lead employees in identifying variances. What happened that you didn't make your goal? Or what happened that you so exceeded your goal? Are you going to be able to do that next week? So variances are positive variances, negative variances. And by doing this and having these huddles, you engage your employees. So the employees look at what are they going to do to improve, and when improve sometimes is let's stay the same, let's do the same thing because it's getting us good results. Let's do something that's really different because it's not getting us a result. So those are actions for improvement can mean stay the same, add more, those kind of things. And in the huddles, you can really give encouragement and support and even spot awards, things that they don't expect for hitting targets and for their innovative thinking. So that is when you take your shared purpose and goals and you align the organization in the performance measures that they need to get, and then you set about your communication system to see how you're doing. This is how you're gaining alignment. And I'm gonna move on in the essence of time. I want to do one more poll here, Victor, and I'm using a term people may not be familiar with, second order problem solving, and I've described it. When I find a problem, because we have problems every day, guys. I know we do. We have problems every day. When I find a problem, I share it with those who are affected by the problem. That's upstream, downstream. And then we work on a solution and we come up with a particular way to solve it and we test it in real time. So quickly, Victor, let's just get a quick poll. Never heard of that. We are expected to do workarounds, or I solve problems but not that way, or yes, that describes how we solve problems.
Thank you, Cynthia. There's the polls for you. 1, 2, 3, and 4. See some numbers starting to come in. To clarify, number 2, we are expected to do workarounds. A workaround, by definition, is not solving a problem. It's basically solving an issue, but not the core problem. So to give that some clarity there. So numbers are coming in, and no one has yet, I don't want to take it, but nobody's yet to vote on number 4, that this is how they solve problems. Working on a solution, testing it in real time until the root problem is gone. I'm going to close out the poll in the interest of time, and it's pretty basic, so let's close that out, and I will share some information with you. Thank you very much. And it looks like, in regards to number 1, 34%, Cynthia, have never heard of this process of solving in real time. Interesting. Number 2, they're expected to do workarounds. Uh, at least they solve issues. That's really high at 48%. Number 3, uh, individuals solve problems, but not in the way you described. That's 18%. And still, number 4 is 0%. Of our audience is solving problems in the manner that you're describing. That's pretty interesting.
Well, and that's why I want to bring these practices forward, because what we have is this in companies is this aggregation of problems till they get so large that then you've got to put a team on it and you got to run Six Sigma projects and it takes a year to get the results out because people are not really solving problems for once and for all. To do adaptive problem solving and to make this work in your culture, you have to have the mindset that people are great problem solvers. And if you disagree with me on that, I'd be surprised because I bet what I find is that anytime an issue is raised, anytime you speak a problem, the first thing everybody does is they want to solve the problem. We're that's how we're wired is to solve problems. And that's a very human trait. The strategy is to do this is to teach second order problem solving. And that second order problem solving is based on scientific method. And that's very simple. Okay, what's the problem? Let's define it. What's a good solution? Let's define it. Let's see what let's see what the current state is and what is the future. What do we really hope to have happen instead? And then, so what are the tests? How are we going to solve it, and how are we going to test that it worked? And by using this technique in real time, you solve problems very, very quickly. And at first, you solve little problems, but as you grow your ability to do this, you solve great big problems very quickly. So the supervisors are really the coaches and they're learners. Basically, we look to supervisors to learn and coach. Their focus is to learn about problem solving and coach people on how to do the problem solving. But their role is no longer the problem solver, just like it is today. We expect supervisors to solve problems. Today, it's the employees. We set it up where the employees are the problem solvers. And the method we use is coached by the supervisors to test their solutions and solve the problem. And it's a scientific method that's applied in real time, part of adaptive design. And again, this is a fantastic method, very quick method, very simple method for to engage everyone in problem solving every day at where they do the work, right at the front of the work. So your improvement practices, what you do when you use adaptive problem solving in this way is that you engage people on a daily basis in solving problems once and for all. And they can't, when they start out, they'll focus on one problem, small problem, and they'll test and get the solution. And then the next problem, they raise their hand, so to speak. These are coming out of Toyota's practices, by the way. The DNA of Toyota uncovered that they use 4 rules and they're focused around adaptive problem solving. And then Carnegie brought that work into America and into the healthcare system. So, what we teach people is to determine what the causes are for any variance in the way things should be working. And we work with employees to identify and fulfill actions so that they know what they should do more of, what they should do less of, what they should continue to do, what they should remove or add. And we work with employees, every employee, leaders included, by the way. This is something that works for leaders, really works for any employee at any level, um, any set of teams at any level. And this will be the subject of future webinars that I'll be giving. And Victor, I'm going to skip this poll because I want to get to the last slide and close out.
Okay.
Um, the last system is really our leadership development and business knowledge development. And our mindset in this is that employees are our business partners, and that our strategy is we want to continually develop business knowledge, the decision making ability, the leadership ability, the communication ability, things like that. Um, Again, same structure, supervisors, coach, and we all learn together because even the supervisors learn. No one knows it all, and we need each other to work together to solve things together and to learn from each other because we're social learners. Humans are very social learners. They learn from each other, and we apply all kinds of method for that learning. We apply blended learning, go to a webinar, and then come together and talk about it. On the job learning, okay, I need to show you how to do it this way because this will work, or let's work together to find a better way. Mentoring, developing your mentors in your organizations for employees so they can learn from each other. So this is really the what I call the development practices. And we're reinforcing the supervisory role as learner and coach, developing employees as business partners, and giving broad access to and teaching P&L and balance sheet and cash flow so that they can understand the language of business, which is the financials, and also broadly developing communication, decision making, process, and skills, and continually informing employees of the business environment, legislation, competitors, so forth and so on. There's lots to learn. All of these help employees be better decision makers, better problem solvers, and engage them in the true business at hand. So just to wrap up,
Here we
we
go from our slide you've seen before.
yep.
And Cynthia,
Sorry,
I'll let you take it.
sorry. I had a gnat fly in my throat.
So what we've got here are the slides you've seen before, keys to engagement culture. This is a systematic structure here, and Cynthia will be articulating more so on it.
I'm
We
ready.
have a, okay,
Sorry about
take it
that.
away. No problem.
We have a gnat problem here, and I can't believe it, but I had a gnat fly in my throat. I just want to wrap up by saying mindset is key. Victor pointed that out. It's really a mindset about, as a leader, how you want to run the company, and as a employee, how you want to participate in the company. So I'm just going to summarize the mindset. We plan together, we win together. We share the Thanksgiving and feast, famine or plenty. We share the stories and speak the truth. People are great problem solvers, and employees are our business partners. These mindsets, if you have these mindsets, these practices grow inside your company, and these are systems that you can call on to say, look, are we engaging people in planning? Are we helping them understand how performance is scored and rewarded? Are we sure that our communication system is giving credible messages? Are we engaging employees in adaptive problem solving? And are we learning every day together and growing together. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, Victor.
Thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate your time. Uh,
So let
again,
me
this,
just finish this. I'm sorry, Victor. It's been a little hard.
okay.
Here we go. So what should you do now? Go ahead and assess the effectiveness of your management systems. How are they doing on those fronts? And then look to see as an employee if you're being included as a business partner or hired hand. We really don't want to be hired hands. We want to be business partners. And then use these systems to really drive a culture of engagement and success. And the only thing I have to say to you, if you're in a situation that doesn't is not described at all by any of these practices, is start where you are. Look to those that you can talk with about this, and let this shape your thinking about how you can become a leader in your organization. If you are a leader in your organization, look at these practices and see what you could do better to really drive an engagement culture. And there we go, Victor. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate it. Thank you to our audience today for attending this call. If you have any questions whatsoever or want to know how to get started, how to assess your company's communication management style, your cultural viability, whatever it may be, contact us at Victor at businessperformanceusa.org. I'll direct that question to the most opportune person to help you. Again, we have folks all over the country with a tremendous amount of expertise, some local right there in your backyard, some across the country, but we come together virtually to help solve your problems and brainstorm on how to improve the performance of your business. Thank you for your time today. This webinar will be available on YouTube, and you can get to that through our site as well, businessperformanceusa.org. Thank you again. This is Victor Dominguez. Appreciate your time.